She was too weak to stand, shivering alone in the freezing mud, until shadows moved in the darkness. Not one, not two, but an entire pack of wolves. The rancher said they'd tear her apart, but when the wolves closed in, they did something no one saw coming. And the truth of what happened next left even scientists speechless. Welcome to MS Incredible Stories. Let's uncover what really happened. Clouds gathered low over the canyon's rim, heavy with unshed rain. A distant rumble of thunder rolled through jagged peaks, as though the mountains themselves whispered warnings. Desert wind whipped sagebrush into trembling waves, carrying the scent of ozone just beyond the horizon. Beneath the storm's silent promise, a mare strained against a fallen branch, her flanks heaving, eyes wide with desperation. Lightning forked overhead, illuminating her trembling form for a heartbeat before plunging the ravine back into deep shadow. She whinnied softly, panic rising in her throat as she searched the rocky ground for her foal. There, in a narrow wash gouge by a flash flood long past, lay a chestnut colt, his slender legs splayed at awkward angles, his body pressed into the dusty soil. The mare nickered urgently, pawing at the gravel, nudging her foal's flank, but his slender frame shivered and still. Rain began to spatter the ground, cold droplets kissing his quivering coat, and the mare pressed closer, seeking warmth for the unnamed youngster she had birthed only weeks before. Above them, storm clouds shifted, casting the pair into surreal twilight, even as dusk approached. The canyon held its breath, waiting. A gap in the clouds allowed moonlight to spill through like an omen. In that pale glow, silver rivulets traced the narrow channel's contours, converging around the immobile foal. The mare shook her head, ears flat, as if vowing to stay until his final breath. Suddenly, distant howls echoed off the sandstone walls, a chorus of spectral voices advancing through the rocks. The mare stiffened, muscles trembling as she turned her head toward the sound. Rain streaked down her face, mingling with tears she could not shed. Yet her spirit did not break. In the collapsing light, she bent her neck over her foal once more, her warmth shielding him from the storm's ruthless bite. Above, a lone hawk wheeled, indifferent to the drama below. But down in the canyon's hollow, life and death lay entwined beneath thunderheads and wolves on. And through it all, the silent storm bore witness to a bond that would soon defy the laws of nature itself. Shivering breaths rattled the colt's ribs as the first drops of rain turned to icy sleet. His small legs, still unsteady from birth, failed to support his weight. Mired in the sandy wash, he could only lay, ears flicking at every distant sound. His chestnut coat, matted with dust, offered little warmth against the damp chill that crept into his bones. Above him, the canyon walls loomed like silent sentinels. Spindly juniper trees clung to rocky ledges, their roots gripping earth as tenuous as the foal's own hold on life. Each gust of wind rattled stones and sent spray of gravel onto his flanks. He blinked, confusion pooling in his dark eyes. Where's his mother? Where's the safety of the herd? A flash of movement caught his gaze. A lone figure, a man in muddy boots and a soaked canvas jacket, picked his way along the ridgeline. But in the half-light, the stranger seemed as lost as the foal. He paused, scanning the wash below, then raised an arm and pointed, as if signaling unseen companions. Hope flared painfully in the young horse's chest, only to be extinguished by another bolt of lightning that splintered the sky. The thunder that followed rattled the stones, and the stranger froze. His silhouette outlined against the storm clouds betrayed both resolve and hesitation. He seemed aware of the colt's plight, yet stayed his descent, perhaps wary of the canyon's treacherous slopes. The foal whimpered, a sound swallowed by the roar of the tempest. He tried to soften it, save strength for when his legs might finally carry him. Night deepened as the rain tapped insistently on the canyon floor. Every drop was a cold reminder that hunger gnawed at his belly and thirst parched his throat. Instinct urged him to rise, but his body had betrayed him. Instead, He closed his eyes against the swirl of wind and water. Somewhere beyond the shadows, wolves howled in unison. The chorus carried both promise and peril. For the lost foal, alone and vulnerable, the wilderness was a vast, indifferent expanse. Yet within that darkness, an unseen force stirred, drawn by the steady rhythm of a heartbeat too precious to abandon. The morning light seeped into the canyon like a gentle promise, but for the colt it arrived too late. His coat, once a vibrant chestnut, was dulled to a rusty brown by sweat and grit. He lay motionless, limbs tangled in thorny scrub, breath's shallow whispers against the still air. His ears, once alert and quivering at every sound, drooped as if resigned. High above, the herd grazed on a distant plateau, silhouettes moving rhythmically against the sky. Their rhythmic sway should have offered comfort, but the colt was too far gone. He strained to lift his head, to catch the familiar scent of mare flesh in the wind, but only gathered dust and sage. His mother's absence was a hollow ache, growing with each passing minute. A sudden crack of limestone beneath a loose boulder startled him. He flinched, muscles trembling both in pain and fear. His legs twitched in a futile dance, betraying a desperate will to survive despite every failing sinew. He made a quiet murmur, half whinny, half plea, as though calling out to the world for mercy. Silhouetted on a rocky ledge, the stranger watched. His canvas jacket was stiff with overnight rain, and his binoculars swung and used at his side. He knelt, peering through the gloom for signs of life. Then, pulling out a small radio, he spoke into its microphone in clipped tones. The colt heard nothing beyond the echo of wind. Below, in the canyon's depths, a scent drifted on the breeze, warm and wild. It was ancient, primal, and it carried the weight of countless generations. The stranger's attention darted toward the sound, his brow furrowing in sudden understanding. But he did not move. Instead, he simply watched, as though waiting for a story he could scarcely believe. The foal's eyes flickered, pupils widening at some unseen shift in the air. His chest heaved once more, slower but determined. Around him, the canyon walls stood silent, bearing witness to abandonment and survival. In that hush, the abandoned foal lay at a crossroads between life and oblivion, unaware that forces both human and wild had already converged to decide his fate. A distant howl drifted through the dawn air, rippling across jagged rock faces and settling into the canyon's hollows. The foal's ears perked, a flicker of recognition stirring beneath his exhaustion. Each echo carried a pulse of life, fierce and untamed. He lifted his head enough to breathe it in, nostrils flaring, though his legs refused to steady him. The stranger crouched at the canyon's lip, phone pressed to his ear, eyes scanning the shadows. He spoke in hushed tones, describing the scene below and the unexpected chorus drawing nearer. Raindrops clung to his hair, but his attention was fixed entirely on the canyon floor. Howls multiplied, creating a symphony that seemed to emanate from every crack in the stone. They rolled and soared, melding into a haunting melody. The foal strained to listen, his ribs rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Each beat whispered survival. Shadows shifted at the edge of the wash, elongated shapes weaving among the sagebrush. Pale muzzles dipped to scent the air, amber eyes glinting with cautious curiosity. The pack approached with calculated grace, aware of every shift in the wind. The stranger held his breath, torn between fascination and fear. For the foal, the howls were a lifeline. He turned his head toward the music of the wild, ears twitching, heart spiking with hope and terror. He sensed something profound, instincts older than memory answering the wolf's call. A young wolf, sleek and silver-furred, stepped into view first. He paused, head low, watching the colt's labored breathing. Behind him, for more emerged, their postures wary yet purposeful. They fanned out, creating a perimeter around the foal, safeguarding him from unseen threats. The stranger exhaled, realizing these were no ordinary predators. The wolves' focus lay not on prey, but on this vulnerable creature at their center. His finger hovered over the radio's button as he considered calling off his team. Instead, he lowered his hand, struck by the unexpected tenderness in the wolf's stance. Above, the sky lightened with promise. The wolves lingered, eyes soft instead of hungry, ears alert instead of aggressive. The foal's breath steadied as if comforted by their guardian's song. In the canyon's stillness, echoes of howls became a vow, an unspoken pact between horse and wolf. Two lives bound by survival in the wild. Moonlight pooled in the canyon's basin, illuminating the dust-laden wash where the colt lay. The wolves moved in silent arcs, their gray forms gliding between rocky shadows like drifting smoke. Each step was deliberate, each glance exchanged measured. They circled the foal in a protective dance, guardians of a fragile life in a merciless land. The colt's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, but within the circle he found a strange peace. The wolves' presence formed a shield against the canyon's chill, their bodies absorbing whispers of wind that might have chilled his bones further. He watched one lean forward, tongue flicking to taste the air around his flanks, assuring himself of the colt's living warmth. Above, a lone bat flitted beneath the overhang, its wings barely stirring the night. Farther along the rim, the stranger crept closer, limbs bent against the stones as though burdened by each step. He paused at the edge of the wolves' circle, binoculars raised, capturing shapes in the dim glow. His breath steamed in the cool air, a silent witness to the unexpected tableau below. A young wolf hesitated by the colt's head, ears flattening to the sides, as though trying to remember the rules of predator and prey. Then, with uncanny gentleness, it pressed its muzzle against the foal's cheek, exhaling warmth. The colt's eyes fluttered, and he nuzzled the wolf's thick fur in a gesture that bridged ancient divides. The stranger lowered his binoculars, heart pounding. He should have feared for the foal, but instead felt awe at the wolf's devotion. He raised his radio, fingers trembling, then paused. There were stories he'd heard of wild animals showing compassion, but never had he imagined witnessing such a proof. Behind the wolves, starlight gleamed off cragged peaks, and the breeze carried the scent of juniper and sage. Every breath in that circle seemed sacred, each heartbeat a testament to survival and solidarity. The wolves shifted again, forming a living barrier, muzzles pointed outward. The colt, though weak, drew comfort from their vigil, chest swelling with the knowledge that he was not alone. In that moment, in the hush of the canyon night, predator and prey intertwined under the watchful eyes of stone and sky, their fates forever bound by circling shadows. Stars glimmered overhead, turning the canyon into a cathedral of night. A steady rhythm pulsed in the darkness, the colt's heartbeat, faint but resolute. Each beat sounded loud in the hush, echoing off cliff walls like distant drums. Amid the wolves' silent vigil, it became a hymn of life refusing to yield. The colt's eyes fluttered open, unsteady focus on the silvered form surrounding him. He felt their warmth seeping through the thin layer of fur and dirt, a comfort stronger than any mother's nuzzle. One wolf, older than the rest, lay with head low beside the foal's flank, ribs rising and falling in sync with his laboring breaths. Each exhale stirred a soft sigh from the pack, as though their very souls harmonized with the fragile pulse at the center. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wet earth and pine resin, mingling with the musk of predator fur. The stallion's ghost, if he had one, could not have sounded more alive than now, his life force tethered by unseen threads to these gray guardians. The stranger crouched nearby, eyes misty behind fogged lenses. He rested a hand on the canyon wall, fingertips brushing sandstone owls carved by wind and water over millennia. In that moment, he felt the ancient weight of the wild pressing in, demanding respect. A distant owl hooted, answering the call of the heartbeat below. The wolves perked up, ears quivering, heads swiveling as though honoring an unspoken covenant. The colt's nostrils flared, tasting acceptance for the first time since his fall. He tried to lift a leg, trembling through the effort, before collapsing again in a soft grate of rock against flesh. One puppy-eyed wolf nudged him gently, pressing its warm snout under his chin to remind him to breathe. Time blurred between breaths and heartbeats, nights stretching into an eternity held together by fierce devotion. The stranger unclipped a small flashlight, but the wolf's presence dimmed its beam, making him lower the light. What needed illumination was already laid bare, a living miracle woven through instinct and choice. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the colt's chest rose a little higher. His pulse, once a whisper, found volume in the dark. Under that tapestry of stars and sentinel rocks, life prevailed, each heartbeat a defiant promise in the night. A pale dawn crept into the canyon, frosting the sagebrush and grass with a silvery glaze. Each blade sparkled like a shard of glass, and a thin mist curled along the wash's contours. The colt's breath billowed in white plumes as he shivered against the chill. Fear and cold coiled in his muscles, but around him the wolves remained steadfast. The morning light revealed their breath, too, wisps of vapor that drifted from muzzles and flanks. The youngest wolf paced the perimeter, paused silent on frosted gravel, while another pressed against the colt's side, offering warmth. The foal's coat lay damp and stiff, but within the circle he felt emboldened. He tried to rise, legs trembling like saplings in a gale, but the frost-slick ground thwarted him. High above, a red-tailed hawk screamed its morning cry, crashing through the stillness. The sound jarred the stranger from his vigil. He rubbed numb fingers and lifted binoculars to survey the scene. The wolves watched the skyward flash, ears pricked, then returned their attention to the colt. He met their amber eyes and felt the knot in his throat loosen. A sudden crack echoed as a small boulder split beneath shifting frost. The colt's head snapped toward the noise, nostrils flared. He backed against the damp earth, trembling anew, but a gray flank materialized behind him, a reassuring wall. The alpha wolf hovered close, tail sweeping soft arcs that brushed the foal's hindquarters. He exhaled, a rumble resonating against the colt's breast. The stranger knelt on frost-crisp ground, catching a shard of morning sunlight in his palm. He swallowed, realizing how close he was to breaching the animal's trust. He reached slowly into his pocket, revealing a single sugar cube, an improvisation from his field kit. Hand-steady, he placed it just outside the wolf's perimeter and stepped back. Hearts pounded in anticipation. One by one, the wolves approached the offering, sniffing cautiously, then devouring it in a single snap of jaws. The colt watched, and hunger stirred behind his fear. A second sugar cube appeared at the stranger's fingertips. He held it aloft, and this time a young wolf retrieved it, carrying it to the foal's muzzle before dropping it softly. The colt's tongue flickered, tasting sweetness against frostbitten lips. His knees buckled, and he tumbled onto his side, but the wolves were there, fanning out, nudging him upright, a living bolster against fear and cold. In the dawn's pale glow, vulnerability became courage, forged by the unexpected kindness of circling shadows. The sun crested the canyon rim, its warm glow melting the frost and painting the rocks in amber light. The foal's chest heaved with each breath, but across his damp coat, the first hints of strength began to show. His ears twitched at distant bird calls, and his eyes, once dull with resignation, gleamed with cautious alertness. Around him, the wolves relaxed their vigil, though none strayed far. The alpha stretched, joints popping in relief, and the young wolf that had delivered the sugar cube nudged the foal's shoulder in encouragement. The colt responded with a tentative nicker, a sound nearly lost in the canyon's vastness but filled with promise. High above, the stranger climbed down the rocky embankment, careful not to disturb the guardians. In one hand, he carried a small satchel of oats and a flask of warm water heated over a portable stove. He knelt at the outer edge of the wolves' circle, setting the bowl of oats gently on the ground. The wolves observed, muzzles lowered, as he drizzled water until steam curled upward in thin tendrils. The colt eyed the offering, nostrils flaring at the scent of grain. He crouched low, muscles straining, and pushed himself forward, scattering frost-crushed pebbles beneath his hooves. One step, then another, and he reached the bowl. A young wolf stepped aside, bowing his head in deference as the foal dipped his muzzle to eat. The stranger exhaled, relief softening his features. He glanced at the wolves, who had shifted into a loose ring, tails relaxed but eyes watchful. No growls, no tension, only acceptance. He whispered into his radio, voice trembling, intact and feeding. Pack is holding position. A reply crackled. Understood. Team is en route with the vet. The foal ate steadily, water glistening on his whiskers. As he raised his head, strength flowing into his limbs, he caught the alpha's gaze. For a heartbeat, they regarded each other, predator and prey bound in an unspoken kinship. Then the wolf turned, tilting his head to the stranger as if granting permission. The canyon echoed with renewed life. The rustle of oats, the foal's soft munching, and distant wings beating against the sky. In that moment, the abandoned colt felt the first true spark of hope, nurtured by human kindness and the unexpected guardianship of circling shadows. Dawn's warmth slid across the canyon floor as the alpha wolf paced in measured strides, nostrils flaring at the mingled scents of oats, sweat, and horseflesh. He paused beside the colt, head low, amber eyes studying the young foal's every breath. The stranger watched from a respectful distance, heart pounding, unsure if he dared hope. The foal's legs trembled as he rose unsteadily, joints still stiff from cold and fear. He approached the alpha with cautious steps, ears pricked forward in curiosity. The wolf did not move away. Instead, he lowered his body to the ground, offering a silent invitation. The colt hesitated, then nestled against the wolf's flank, as though seeking reassurance from this unlikely guardian. Up on the rim, the rest of the pack shifted restlessly. They watched the exchange with alert postures, tails lashing in anticipation. Yet none challenged their leader's decision. Even the youngest pups laid down among the rocks, waiting. The alpha lifted his head and growled softly, not a warning, but a signal. He rose and circled the foal, sniffing along his ribs, then brushed past, nudging him gently toward the oats and water. The colt followed, head bowed in deference, as if understanding that the wolf's authority extended over this fragile life. The stranger, emboldened, set down a small satchel of blankets and medical supplies. His hand trembled as he unrolled gauze. The alpha's ears twitched, but he remained. He even stepped back, allowing the stranger to tend to the colt's chafed legs. With each careful bandage, respect deepened between man and wolf. Then the alpha lifted his muzzle and howled, a single, clear note that rippled across the canyon. Instantly, the rest of the pack joined, a harmonic chorus pledging allegiance, not only to him, but to the colt at their center. The stranger felt tears sting his eyes at the raw beauty of their song. As the echoes faded, the alpha approached the foal once more and pressed a firm muzzle against his forehead. The colt nickered softly, pressing back. The wolf then turned and led the way toward a narrow game trail leading out of the wash. The colt rose to follow, hesitant at first, but the alpha paused, casting a final gaze over his shoulder before moving forward. In that decisive moment, predator became protector, and a wild heart chose compassion over instinct, an act that would alter the course of two lives forever. Dust motes danced in slanting sunlight as the alpha led the colt along a worn game trail, veering away from the wash. The young horse's hooves crunched on gravel, each step gaining confidence. Behind them, the stranger followed at a cautious distance, clutching his radio to silence it. A faint scent drifted on the breeze, sweet grass and mare's musk, awakening something deep within the foal. His ears pricked, and he quickened his pace, head low to trace the aroma. The alpha slowed, head cocked, as if curious about this stir of memory. Ahead, the canyon walls opened onto a narrow plateau dotted with sage and wildflowers. Beyond, a herd grazed peacefully, their coats shining like jewels in the morning light. The colt froze, heart pounding at the familiar sight and scent. He lifted his head, nostrils quivering, and emitted a high-pitched whinny that echoed across the rocks. Within the herd, a mare's gaze snapped up. Recognition sparked in her dark eyes. She trotted forward, legs pumping in graceful arcs. The colt's legs trembled with relief as he took off toward her, the alpha stepping back respectfully. The mare strained against the distance, nicker mingling with his call, and they met halfway, muzzles brushing in an embrace older than time. He pressed his forehead to hers, inhaling the warmth of her flanks. Memories flooded back, nursing beneath starlight, racing across open plains, her protective shadow at his shoulder. He trembled with emotion, whinnying again, tears wetting his dark muzzle. The alpha watched quietly, chest rising and falling in steady confidence. Then he padded forward, head low, and the colt dipped his nose to greet him. The wolf's amber eyes glinted with quiet satisfaction. In that moment, two bonds formed, the primal tie between mother and foal and the unexpected kinship between horse and wolf. The stranger exhaled, stepping close enough to snap photos, careful not to intrude. As the mare led her foal back to the herd, the alpha lingered at the edge before turning away, ready to vanish into the maze of canyons. The colt watched him go, nuzzling his mother's side, then glanced once more toward the receding shadow. In the soft hush of reunion, a mother's memory and a wolf's compassion converged, weaving a new chapter in the saga of survival and the enduring power of connection. Night fell again, and the herd bedded down in a sheltered hollow beneath granite outcrops. The colt nestled against his mother, her presence a steady warmth in the cooling air. Beyond the glow of moonlight, shadows danced among the rocks, shapes that vanished as soon as they were glimpsed. The alpha and his pack took position on a ridge overlooking the hollow, silhouettes etched against the starlit sky. Their forms were spectral, like ghosts answering an ancient summons. The colt lifted his head at a hush in the night air, ears swiveling at the faint rustle of hooves and wind through juniper boughs. From the darkness, a lone coyote slunk forward, drawn by the promise of vulnerable prey. Its yellow eyes glinted as it skirted the herd's perimeter, muscles coiled for a strike. But before it could advance, a low growl cut through the stillness. The alpha emerged from shadow, fur bristling, teeth bared. His stance was unyielding, a guardian's vow made manifest. The coyote hesitated, hackles raised, then slunk back into the night. In its place, other forms slithered closer, raven and owl, bat and fox, wild apparitions drawn by the scent of life. Yet none ventured within the pack circle. It was as if invisible wards held them at bay. The colt watched them all wide-eyed. He sensed the pack's silent communication, each movement a message of protection. The wolves' eyes reflected the moon, ancient and unwavering. Around them, the canyon slept, but these ghostly sentinels kept watch, eyes keen for any threat. His mother shifted, nuzzling him gently. He pressed in her warmth, grateful for her strength and for the wolves' ever-vigilant guard. Somewhere deep in the darkness, the stranger and his team remained hidden, flashlights stowed, awed by the scene unfolding below. Above, meteors streaked across the sky, brief fires in the void. For a moment, the world felt limitless, boundless. Yet in that vastness, a foal lay cradled between species, guarded by ghosts both real and imagined. And as sleep claimed him at last, he dreamed of running free, his heart forever marked by the pack that stood sentinel in the night. Before dawn broke, the canyon echoed with rising song. One wolf lifted its muzzle and howled, a pure, haunting note that pierced the hush. In moments, dozens of voices joined, a crescendo of gold and gray reverberating against stone walls. The colt stirred, blinking in the dim pre-light. He lifted his head toward the sound, ears quivering. In that chorus, he heard every heartbeat of the pack, the ancient rhythms of hunt and hearth, of loss and loyalty. He raised his own voice, a tentative whinny that blended into their song, forging a new harmony between horse and wolf. The alpha's howl deepened, and the pack responded in rolling swells that rose and fell like waves on the shore. Each wolf contributed, the low rumble of seasoned elders, the keening cries of youths testing their lungs, the sharp, jubilant ululations of pups discovering their strength. Together they formed a living tapestry of sound, threading life into the sleeping canyon. Above, the first rays of sun glimmered pink against the horizon, revealing clusters of wildflowers along the wash. The chorus wove around the blooms, honoring life's fragile beauty. The colt's mother nickered softly, nudging him to his feet. He shook dew from his coat and trotted forward, joining her side. The stranger, hidden among juniper shadows, pressed his palm to his chest, feeling the echoes resonate within him. He raised his camera and recorded the ritual, mindful not to break the spell. His teammates remained still. Even their breathing softened to refrain from disturbing the moment. As the wolves' final notes faded, the canyon settled into a sacred calm. The alpha descended from the ridge, leading his pack toward distant hunting grounds. But before they left, he paused beside the colt, amber eyes meeting dark, equine ones. No challenge passed between them, only mutual respect and the unspoken promise that they were forever bound. The colt nuzzled his mother, then lifted his gaze to watch the pack's retreating forms fade into sunlit dust. In the hush that followed, he carried with him the echo of their song, a testament to compassion born from instinct, to a chorus that transcended the divides of wilderness and species alike. Pale light seeped into the canyon, softening jagged rocks and painting the wash in shades of rose and gold. The foal stretched, legs stiff but willing, and stepped from the hollow toward his mother's waiting flank. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming sage, a rebirth carried on morning breezes. His coat, matted from days of struggle, caught the light, revealing streaks of chestnut and copper. He raised his head, nostrils flaring at the promise of warmth. Each breath seemed easier than the last, his lungs filling without the rasp of exhaustion. The canyon awakened around him. Larks trilled from high perches, and the distant rush of a hidden spring whispered like a secret. The stranger emerged onto the plateau, careful to stay downwind and distant. In one hand he held a notebook, the other a flask of fresh water. He knelt and marked the colt's improved gait, eyes bright with relief. With a soft exhale, he stood and raised his binoculars to scan the ridges, half expecting to see the wolves watching still. But the alpha and his pack had vanished, leaving only footprints etched in soft soil and memories etched in the colt's heart. The colt hesitated, glancing at the trail they had taken. A gentle nicker broke the silence as his mother nudged him toward a grove of juniper, urging him onward. He followed, each step surer than the one before, until a ripple of movement caught his eye. In a shadowed ledge above, a lone wolf silhouette paused, amber eyes reflecting dawn's glow. The colt met that gaze, and for a moment they stood in silent communion, two lives shaped by hunger and loss, now linked by an act of grace. Then the wolf slipped away, dissolving into the canyon's contours as if he had never been. The colt turned back to his mother, nuzzling her mane, drawing comfort from her warmth. Behind them, the canyon held its breath, washed in dawn's pale light. In that gentle glow, life beyond hardships seemed possible, and a foal born to darkness discovered his place in a world that still held unexpected wonders. The sun climbed higher, igniting sandstone walls in molten ochre. The colt and his mother drifted toward a shady alcove beneath a cluster of juniper trees. The air was warm but held a brisk edge, reminding them the desert could still bite. As the mare grazed, the foal curled his legs beneath him and settled on soft pine needles, eyes half-lidded in contentment. From a rocky perch above, a wolf watched. Not the alpha this time, but a younger member of the pack, lean and silver-furred. He remained motionless, ears swiveling at each distant sound, the rattling of insects, the murmur of the wind through sage. The colt sensed him before he saw him, nostrils flaring to catch that familiar musk. He lifted his head, ears pricked. The wolf's gaze held no hunger. Instead, his amber eyes bore into the foals with quiet curiosity. He shifted slightly, paws barely disturbing the dust, then lowered his head in a gesture that felt like an invitation rather than a threat. The colt rose and stepped forward, mane brushing against the wolf's nose as they met halfway across a dusty clearing. Above them, a hawk wheeled, its shadow drifting across the scene. The wolf's muscles tensed, as if ready to flee, but the colt dipped his head in respect, and the wolf eased back, remaining. They stood in stillness, two creatures bound by memory and the unspoken promise of protection. Not far below, the stranger observed through binoculars from between two boulders. He rested a hand on the stock of his camera, but did not raise it. Capturing this moment felt secondary to simply bearing witness to the unlikely vigil unfolding. Behind him, the herd meandered along a rocky trail, oblivious to the quiet pack above. The colt's mother lifted her head, sensing the kinship in the air. She moved toward her foal, casting a wary eye on the wolf, then relaxed when she saw the boy's calm. The wolf lingered until the mare's steady nicker urged his foal to return. With one last glance, the wolf turned and melted into the juniper shadows, leaving hoofprints beside pawprints in the dirt. The colt trotted back to his mother and fell in step at her shoulder, safe once more under an unexpected watch. Scars etched the alpha's muzzle like ancient runes, each one a testament to battles long past. At dawn, he padded into the clearing where the colt and his mother grazed on tender grasses. His gait was deliberate, hips swaying with the weight of both age and authority. The mare lifted her head, ears swiveling as she recognized the wolf's silhouette against the rosy sky. The colt halted, nostrils flaring at the familiar scent. He backed away slightly, muscles coiled in uncertainty. His heart hammered, intent on flight or fight, until the alpha lowered his head in a slow, deliberate bow, an homage rather than challenge. The colt nickered softly and stepped forward, nudging the wolf's flank with youthful eagerness. Beneath the wolf's fur, jagged ridges from old wounds rippled as he shook himself free of sleep. He pressed his muzzle against the colt's neck, exhaling a breath tinged with musk and history. The colt leaned into the contact, trusting this scarred guardian more than any member of his own herd. High above, the stranger climbed onto a boulder for a better view. He held his camera at the ready, but hesitated, reluctant to intrude upon this fragile trust. Instead, he watched as the duo formed a tableau of raw survival. Predator and prey united by instinct and intimacy. A breeze rustled through sagebrush, carrying the distant roar of a spring-fed stream. The alpha lifted his head, ears pricked, then turned and trotted toward the water's edge. The colt followed suit, flicking his tail as he regained strength in his legs. They walked side by side, pawprints and hoofprints marking their shared path. At the creek, the alpha knelt to lap clear water, cautious not to stir too much. The colt dipped his muzzle beside him, and the wolf nudged his son's head toward the deeper pool. Together, they drank in silence, a communion beyond words. Afterward, the wolf lingered, watching the colt splash at the water's edge. A flicker of amusement in his amber eyes betrayed a softer side beneath those battle-hardened scars. Then, as the sun climbed higher, he turned away, vanishing back toward the ridge. The colt nickered, calling after him, but the wolf paused only long enough to cast a final glance over his shoulder, a silent vow that he would always watch over the foal he had chosen to protect. A warm breeze swept through the canyon, carrying the mingled scents of sagebrush, pine, and distant wildflowers. The colt stood atop a gentle rise, ears swiveling at the soft susurrus that drifted on the wind. It was as though voices from the earth itself whispered secrets, echoes of every creature that had ever called these rocks home. He pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring to catch more of those murmurs. Below him, the herd grazed near a cluster of junipers, tails flicking at passing cicadas. His mother nickered encouragement, but his gaze remained fixed on the breeze-tossed grasses, where shadows danced like living phrases. Down the trail, the stranger emerged carrying a small wind chime fashioned from driftwood and metal bits. He moved with quiet reverence, setting it on a sun-bleached stump. A few tentative taps coaxed its hollow tones, which chimed softly, each note a reply to the canyon's own song. The colt's head snapped toward the sound, nostrils quivering at the strange yet familiar melody. Moments later, the wolf appeared at the edge of the clearing, drawn by the gentle chime. His silhouette was lit in gold, scars dark against his gray pelt. He paused, ears pricked, then stepped forward and sniffed the wind chime, tilting his head as though parsing its meaning. The colt trotted to his side, leaning against the wolf in silent solidarity. The wind carried the chime's tone across the canyon, and soon a chorus of natural sounds joined. Distant woodpeckers tapping, larks trilling, and the rush of unseen breezes through hidden fissures. It was a symphony older than memory, a convergence of human craft and wild instinct. The stranger backed away, allowing his subjects their moment. He crouched behind a boulder, camera forgotten, as he simply observed the communion. The colt closed his eyes, nostrils flaring, absorbing every vibration. The wolf pressed his flank against the foal's shoulder, a gentle anchor in the swirling harmonies. As the sun dipped low, shadows stretching long, the wind chime rang once more, a clear, resonant tone. The colt bolted upright, chest swelling with newfound purpose. Life, he realized, was shaped not only by survival, but by moments of shared beauty, whispers in the wind that bound all beings, predator and prey, human and earth, in a single, living breath. Dawn crept through the junipers as the pack gathered beside the wash. One by one, the wolves fanned out around the colt, forming a protective semicircle. The alpha stood at the center's edge, his scarred muzzle dipped in a small pool, stirring water into gentle ripples. The stranger arrived quietly, carrying a canvas satchel of field supplies. He knelt beside the colt, pulling out a small vial of electrolyte solution and a syringe. The colt flinched at the sight of the unfamiliar tools, ears flattening. But before the stranger could proceed, the youngest wolf stepped forward, low growl rumbling in his chest. He pressed a cautious muzzle against the colt's side, as though offering reassurance. Emboldened by the wolf's gesture, the stranger administered the solution, his hand steady. He whispered calming words, and the colt settled, trusting the stranger as the wolf watched. Around them, the pack remained vigilant, eyes gleaming with quiet approval. After the injection, the colt's breathing eased. His flanks rose and fell with less effort, and color returned to his gums. A middle-aged wolf padded forward, nose brushing the colt's jaw, then lapped at a shallow dish the stranger had filled with water. The colt followed suit, dipping his muzzle beside his guardian's. High above, a raven cawed, and the wolves lifted their heads in acknowledgement. The alpha howled once, a clarion call that summoned the pack closer. They formed a tighter circle, muzzles lowered to the ground, and each in turn sniffed at the colt's legs and belly, assessing the healing processes they could not comprehend, yet honoring them. The stranger packed away his kit, heart pounding with exhilaration. He watched as the wolves' presence seemed to accelerate the colt's recovery. The young foal nudged the alpha's flank in gratitude, and the wolf responded by nuzzling the foal's shoulder. As the morning sun climbed, the pack dispersed, slipping into the scrub and rock with silent grace. The colt stood taller, strength returning to his limbs. He watched their fading forms, chest swelling with life renewed, not just by medicine, but by kinship. In that moment, he understood that healing came in many forms, from human hands and from the devoted guardians of the wild. Gray dusk settled over the canyon, and the colt's legs shook as he tried to trot along a narrow ledge. His hooves slipped on crumbling sandstone,